What is a modern British RP accent?
That's a question I get asked a lot. A lot.
Seriously, a lot.
And in this lesson, I'm going to be answering that question and others such as...
Is there a difference between RP and modern RP?
And...
What do the letters RP stand for?
Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to English Right Now. My name is Roy Woodhouse, and I'm your British English teacher. And on this channel, we focus on all things related to British English, and especially a modern British RP accent. Now, you may have seen me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and a lot of my videos, I start like this.
How to say this word in a modern British RP accent.
As I said, I'm a teacher who loves teaching a modern British RP accent. In fact, I also have a course that teaches it called the Ultimate British Pronunciation Guide, where students learn a modern British RP accent with me. But this lesson, we're going to focus on answering that question, what is a modern British RP accent? So let's answer this first question first.
What does RP mean?
So the letters RP stand for received pronunciation. It is a learnt accent and it is a non-regional accent. So that means you could go to Scotland and hear somebody speaking in an RP accent. You could find somebody in the south, in London, all over the country. Now, it is predominantly found in the southeast of England, but technically you could find it anywhere. And as I said, it's a learnt accent, which means that basically it was taught to a certain person. So people can choose to adopt an RP accent. So if a native British speaker can adopt an RP accent, that means that you can learn it too. Now, there are lots of wonderful accents across the UK, and modern RP is just one of them. But this lesson will focus on a modern British RP accent, but I do suggest you check out other accents by listening to lots of other videos on the subject. But as I said, I have a modern British RP accent. It is the accent that I teach, and it is the focus of this lesson. So RP is sometimes also known as the King's English, which formerly was known as the Queen's English, but But today it can be known as King's English or even BBC English. Now, there are a few things to say about RP, and notice that I teach a modern RP accent. That is a very important thing, but there's some things to say about RP. Now, traditionally, it was a taught accent, and it often came for students in private schools, and therefore some people attributed kind of RP to a class-based system. Now, we are differentiating between RP and modern RP, that will come soon. RP was seen as, and is still seen as, by many, as a rather prestigious accent that is related to education. But, as I said, the focus of this lesson is modern RP, which is why I'm going to answer this question.
Why do you say modern RP?
So, modern RP, that word modern, really tells you that it is the modern equivalent of an RP accent, modern RP. That's because accents evolve, they change, they develop over time, and there are some distinct differences between RP and modern RP, some of which we'll touch on in this lesson. So the truth is, modern RP is quite different to something that was spoken 50 years ago, like the RP of old. In fact, if you compare King Charles and Prince William, the ways in which they speak, it's going to be somewhat different. My accent is a modern RP accent, which means I'm closer in speaking to William than I would be to King Charles. Now, another name for modern RP that you may hear some people use is Standard Southern British. Some people say Standard Southern British English, and that's because modern RP, even though it's still quite non-regional, is predominantly found in the southeast of England. We're going to talk about how many speakers there are in the southeast of England a little bit later in this lesson. And in fact, the handbook of the International Phonetic Association uses the term Standard Southern British to mean RP. Page 4 reads, Standard Southern British, where standard should not be taken as implying a value of judgment of correctness, is the modern equivalent of what has been called received pronunciation, RP. It is an accent of the southeast of England which operates as a prestige norm there and, to varying degrees, in other parts of the British Isles and beyond. So, modern British RP is predominantly found in the southeast of England. That's where I live as well. I actually live on a small island called the Isle of Wight. Now, the Isle of Wight has its own accent, but I don't have the local accent. In fact, there's an interesting story related to me that I can very quickly talk about, but I'll get into another lesson as well. I was actually born in the Midlands of England in a city called Nottingham. It's famous for Robin Hood. Now, for the first 6 years of my life, I grew up in Derbyshire, and I came to the Isle of Wight with a very strong Derbyshire accent. Now, when I started meeting other children and the other children sounded very different, I wanted to fit in. So I remember saying to my mum, please mum, help me get the local accent. So she actually sent me to somebody who taught me my accent, the accent that I now speak with. Now, ironically, I never got the local accent to the Isle of Wight. I instead got a modern British RP accent, which is what I speak to you with now. And that also means that if I can learn an accent, you can too. And that's what I teach on my course, The Ultimate British Pronunciation Guide. If you are interested in taking your modern British RP accent to the next level, please write me a comment and I'll send you some more information. But on with this lesson. So I checked out a BBC article related to how many speakers of a modern British RP accent there are in the southeast of England. According to this article, the King's English and Cockney are no longer common dialects among young people in the southeast of England, according to a new study. Researchers from the University of Essex studied the dialects of a group of 18 to 33-year-olds in the region. They identified 3 voices: Estuary English, Southern British English, and Multicultural London English. In recent years, Cockney and the King's English were spoken by people of all ages, but now 49% of the participants spoke in a standard Southern British English accent, which the study said was a modern, updated version of received pronunciation. So there again, we have another name for modern RP. People with a modern British RP accent tended to say words like goose, with the tongue much further forward in the mouth, sounding a bit more like geese. So let me say this for you: goose, geese. And in fact, my tongue is much further forward than an old RP accent, which would have it more up here. Goose, 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 goose. There is quite a distinct difference. Accents change, accents evolve, people speak differently over time. So to go back to that really important question,
You say modern RP. Is the word modern important?
yes, it's really important to say modern RP rather than RP, because modern RP refers to the newer, more updated version of the accent, of which there is a very distinct difference between modern RP and RP. So that brings us on to this question.
What are the differences between RP and modern RP?
So let's make a few comparisons between traditional RP and modern RP. So first of all, let's take a look at these 2 words: really and rarely. So this one has the diphthong ear, and this one has the diphthong air. Really, rarely. There's quite a distinct difference. However, in a more traditional RP, those 2 words, they'd be much closer in pronunciation. Really and rarely. Another feature of a traditional RP accent is the diphthong whereas in a modern RP accent, that diphthong is slightly less pronounced, and in fact, in a lot of words, it's being dropped in favour of other vowel sounds. So let's take a look at this word. For me, this word is tor, with that or vowel sound, the monophthong vowel sound, or, the same vowel sound we see in the word door, tor. However, in traditional RP, you'd be more likely to hear a speaker saying tur, rather than tor. Now, both of those pronunciations are still recognised by the Cambridge Dictionary, but personally, I'd say more and more people are moving to say tor. But if you want a more traditional RP accent, which would be found in things like Downton Abbey and in the circles of Speaking with the King, then you may want to really emphasise that But if you want a modern RP accent, which is more contemporary and updated, you need to remember that a lot of times that vowel sound, that diphthong, is changing. But of course, we do still use it in words like pure, cure, although maybe some people are smoothing that vowel. That's a subject for another lesson as well. So that's 2 ways that modern RP and traditional RP are different. And in fact, there are lots of differences that we could talk about. This lesson could go on for hours, but now I wanted to talk about some signature sounds of a modern British RP accent. This is the accent that I teach on this channel, on my Instagrams, my TikToks, and also on my course, The Ultimate British Pronunciation Guide. It's a course which teaches you a modern British RP accent. So much like I learnt it when I was a child, I help other people adopt the accent if that's the accent they want. So let's go back to that very first question.
Seriously, what is a modern British RP accent?
And really talk about some hallmark sounds, some signature sounds of the accent. Now, I'm not going to go into all of them now because obviously that's what a course is for, and that's why my course takes hours upon hours of study and hard work with me. But let's talk about some signature sounds. First of all, a modern British RP accent is non-rhotic. That means we don't always pronounce the R's. We only tend to pronounce our sound when it comes in front of a vowel sound, which is why my name is Roy. I pronounce the there, but in a word like water, as an isolated word, we don't pronounce the R at the end. Now, if it comes in a sentence followed by a vowel sound, we do. But as an isolated word, we say water, water, ending in a schwa sound. If you compare that to some rhotic accents, they may say water, water, water. And yes, in the UK, we do also have some rhotic accents, although most of the accents across the UK are, in fact, non-rhotic. General American is a good example of a rhotic accent. They would say water, whereas I would say water. Another feature of a modern British RP accent is the long R vowel sound. Ah. So it's the same sound we see in a word like car. However, a modern British RP accent tends to use this sound more than some other accents across the UK. That's down to something called the trap bath split. So in the north, somebody may say the word path, path, with the short a vowel sound, whereas I would say path, path. Few examples: bath in a modern British RP accent, bath in the north. Grass, R, that long R vowel sound, in a modern British RP accent, grass in the north. And fast in a modern British RP accent, whereas somebody in the north may say fast. Both of the pronunciations are fine, both of the pronunciations are correct, but in a modern British RP accent, we would say fast, not fast. So if you want a modern British RP accent, make sure you're using that long R vowel sound in certain words. Another question I get asked a lot is, do we drop the H in a modern British RP accent? So occasionally in certain function words, yes, we may drop the H, but never at the start of a sentence. So we wouldn't say, how are you? We would say, how are you? We do not drop the H in that case. Also, there are some words that have a silent H, like honest, honourable, and hour. However, those aren't really about H dropping. They're just the pronunciations of the words. So normally in a modern British RP accent, we pronounce our H's, and especially at the start of the sentence. So don't say, who are you? Say, who are you? Don't say, hotel, say, hotel. Now, with an H dropping, in those cases, it sounds much closer to a Cockney accent. But in a modern British RP accent, we don't normally drop our H's unless they're in certain function words in the middle of a sentence. In fact, I could do a whole lesson on the next sound, and it is talking about the intervocalic T sound. If a T comes between two vowels, we normally pronounce it in a modern British RP accent. So let's go back to our word water. Water. Listen to that T sound. Water. Water. We do not use the glottal stop in the middle of two vowels. Some accents do. For example, a Cockney accent would say water, water, whereas I would say water in a modern British RP accent. And then, of course, the Americans will use more of a flap T, which is more like water. But in a modern British RP accent, we do pronounce that T sound when it comes in the middle of two vowels. Water. And that noise in the middle of a Cockney accent, water, is known as a glottal stop. It's a glottal T. And while in a modern British RP accent, we don't use a glottal T in the middle of two vowels, there are sometimes we use a glottalized sound in a modern British RP accent. That's a subject for another lesson as well. One signature sound of a modern British RP accent is the diphthong O. 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 Now, it's slightly changed from a more traditional time when it would be more like O. O. But these days, it sounds more like Oh, but one thing I will say is while that sound is really important in a modern British RP accent, don't over-exaggerate it. We don't need to say hello. It's hello, hello, hello. But one mistake I often hear students making is pronouncing that O diphthong as more like a O sound. So in hello, instead of saying hello, they'll say hello. Doesn't sound quite right. So in a modern British RP accent, we really do like that diphthong O. But we don't over-pronounce it. Please don't make that mistake. In fact, if you do want to learn more about that diphthong and one of the most important and most mispronounced words in a modern British RP accent, you can check out this lesson on what I would say is the first and most important word that you need to get right. You can check that video out, but thank you very much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you next time.